Karmic Vibes by VMS, Chapter 1 introduces Meera, her solitude, and haunting quiet new life in Bangalore. The beginning, the rain had followed Meera all the way from Chennai to Bangalore, a quiet, uninvited companion that seemed to know her moods better than any human ever did. It had been raining when the Moors unloaded her furniture, and she placed her typewriter and the laptop as well as the desktop by the wide balcony door. And even when she made her first cup of tea in the new house, the villa stood in one of those freshly built gated enclaves that promised security, privacy, and silence. Three things Mira longed for, though she didn't yet understand what silence could do to heart already accustomed to loneliness. And the lawns were trimmed to perfection, bougainvillea arched in disciplined shapes, and the roads were so clean they looked like they have been washed with care rather than rain. And for the rest of the world, Mira was a woman of success, a celebrated author. Her books, The Silent Mind, Love in Middle Age, and Teenage Whispers, and a memoir simply titled Becoming Mira had earned her recognition and envy. Readers loved her honesty, her tone of quiet defiance, her way of turning pain into poetry. And what they did not know was that every sentence she wrote was a confession she could never speak aloud. Inside the white walled villa, her life was divided into three rhythms: writing, caregiving, and enduring. Her husband Raghav, a man of great intelligence and small warmth, lived in the rooms across the hall. His degenerative illness had slowly turned him into a figure of routine and dependence. They had been married for 30 years, yet she had never once known the warmth of his arms or the spontaneity of his laughter. Compassion had replaced affection, habit had replaced touch, and duty had replaced everything else. Their daughter, Dr. Ananya, at one of the city's leading hospitals, was the glue that held the fragments together. She was devoted, tender, disciplined, the kind of daughter who carried responsibility as if it were part of her DNA. Her presence softened and home's edges, but her professional life left her little time for herself or for her mother. And sometimes Mira watched her leave in the morning, stethoscope swinging, eyes alert yet distant, and though she had learned early what it took me decades to accept, love and pain often wear the same face. The first weeks in Bangalore passed like pages turning in slow motion. Mira spent her mornings in the balcony overlooking in the lush avenue where trees bent slightly under the weight of rain. She had placed a small wooden desk there, nothing ornate, just a surface to write and think. From that perch, she watched life unfold at a distance. Children leaving for school, women chatting near the gate, security guards exchanging gossip, dogs wagging at the monsoon air. She was part of the scene, yet never within it, an observer, not a participant. Neighbors spoke of her in soft curiosity. That's Mira, the writer. She never comes to parties, and she always writing something, maybe a new novel. She looks sad, doesn't she? She never minded the whispers. After all, she wrote about human hearts. What irony would it be for to fear them? Her days were a quiet choreography, brewing filter coffee, cooking for Raghav, her dependent husband, tending to her plans, and teaching online writing classes to distant students who called her ma'am with affection. In the evening, she sat again in a balcony with a diary open, her pen still, not to write but to listen, and she would be typing on a laptop. There was something sacred about listening to silence. It carried the echoes of things unspoken. Across a narrow lane stood another villa, a large square structure painted in earthy tones, always lively with movement. Sometimes laughter spilled out from its windows, sometimes the clang of whistles, sometimes the faint notes of music. Mira never looked directly, only caught glimpses in the corner of her eye. The family seemed complete: a husband, wife, two teenagers, and an elderly mother who watered the plants each morning. Yet occasionally a shadow moved differently, one that lingered a little longer, one that didn't belong to the rhythm of the other. She noticed it one evening while adjusting her potted lilies. A man, perhaps in his late 50, in his early 50s, or could be, late 40s, standing at the terrace, arms resting on the parapet, eyes lost somewhere in the distance. He didn't look at her, not directly, but there was something in his stillness that mirrored hers. For the next few days, she saw him often, sometimes late at night, sitting with a cup of tea, sometimes early morning, speaking to the old woman, his mother, she guessed. Once she saw him arguing softly with someone, and his wife most likely. But what caught her attention was not his presence, but the quiet after he left, as though even the house held its breath. Bangalore nights had their own flavor, a mix of patriarch and the melancholy. On such nights, Mira often wondered what life would have been if she had known love not as an abstract concept, but as a living, breathing experience. She had written about romance, about passion, connection, yet never tasted any of it. Her love had always been spiritual, cerebral, and never bodily, never reciprocated. Still, she believed in something beyond, a pull between souls that needed no means or times. She often thought of karma not as a punishment but as a continuity, lives and hearts folding into each other across births like unfinished poems. Sometimes, when she looked at the sky, she felt as if someone somewhere was also looking up at the same moment, not knowing why, just feeling the same tug in the chest. And perhaps she thought that it was karma, feels like no action but recognition. On a particularly still evening when the air smelled of wet jasmine and electricity, she noticed the man again. This time their eyes met briefly, accidentally. Neither of them looked away. Something passed between them, subtle but undeniable, like the faint current before a storm. And then, without meaning to, Mira smiled, not fully, but only not obviously, just enough to acknowledge the connection. From that night on, something within her shifted. Writing came easier, her thoughts grew warmer. She felt seen, though no word has been exchanged. And deep within her, beneath the scars of duty, beneath the years of unspoken longing, a quiet voice whispered, "The universe has finally remembered you." Next chapter, The Man Across the Lane. Every neighbor has one house that seems noisier than the rest. The sound of children running, television blaring, utensils clanging, voices overlapping until even the silence is crowded. Rajiv's house was one that ate inside him. They lived a quiet that none of them could hear. He was a man people called successful businessman, the owner of small but growing construction business, known for his calm voice, punctuality, and loyalty to his word. To most, Rajiv embodied steadiness, a reliable husband, dutiful son, responsible father, but steadiness is often mistaken for peace. His life was more like a well built wall, and firm, functional, and utterly devoid of windows. The house itself reflected his contradictions. The ground floor belonged to his mother, Kamala, a woman who still believed that incense smoke could chase away sadness. She prayed at dawn, hummed bhajans through the day, and ended each night lighting a lamp for her son's happiness. The middle floor was occupied by his wife Priya and their two teenage children, both too busy with screens and schedules to notice the growing distance between their parents. And then there was Roger's floor, the topmost one, his office come a relaxation, a kind of part home, part retreat. His room opened to a small terrace, a pergola with an old rocking chair and a clay coffee mug that was never washed, and it was most probably looking some kind of nostalgic. It was there he spent most nights, staring at the skyline as if searching for something the city might have hidden. Marriage had once been a hopeful word. He met Priya when he was 30. She was bright, ambitious, full of laughter. Their first years were ordinary but affectionate. The kind of marriage looks perfect in photographs. Then came time, the slow eraser of illusions and responsibilities, multiplied conversations. Thin laughter became memory. They began to coexist rather than connect. Priya drifted towards social circles, kitty parties, weekend dinners, filling her loneliness with noise. Rajiv, on the other hand, filled his life with work. When he returned home late at night, often after 11, she was asleep or pretending to be. The distance between them wasn't physical, it was invisible, emotional, irreparable. His mother noticed it, of course, one evening during dinner. She said gently, "You can can build walls for others, Rajiv, but don't live behind one yourself. He smiled faintly. Some walls keep others safe, Ma. She didn't argue. She knew he meant his children, not himself. Then came that night an argument changed the house rhythm. It began with words between his mother and Priya over something trivial, salt perhaps, or the timing of a meal. But beneath it lay years of unspoken resentment. Voices rose, tempers flared, and Rajiv, tired from the day's work, found himself torn between two women he loved differently but equally. By the end of the week, his mother had moved upstairs to the third floor, small, separate, and quiet. Rajiv made sure she had everything, a gas stove, a caretaker, even a small television. But when he saw her light own lamp in solitude, something inside him cracked. The house, though still full, had become divided, like a heart split into rooms. He began spending more time on the terrace, often after midnight when the whole lane slept. The city shimmered below, alive yet detached, and across the lane, like a reflection from another life, sat the woman on the balcony. He noticed her the way one notices a poem in a noisy room. Not immediately, but once you do, you can't unsee it. She sat often by the railing, her hair loosely tied, her presence calm and self contained, looking beautiful though she could be around 50. Sometimes she was writing, sometimes just watching the rain, and sometimes engaged in classes, talking and giggling, and face carried that quiet endurance only solitude can teach. She looks determined, beautiful, bright, and clear cut tone with a lot of focus. Sometimes her glimpses falls on him, a kind of recognition, a soul connection, a karmic vibe. Rajiv did not know who she was, but every time he saw her, something in him stilled. There was no attraction, not in the ordinary sense. It was recognition, the kind that doesn't belong to the present moment but to something far older. He began to time his evenings unconsciously around her, and Mira too noticed his presence. Whenever she was in the balcony, he lingered on his terrace longer. If she wasn't, he felt the night heavier. Even his tea tasted different, as if steeped in absence. And once, when Diwali approached, he saw arranging lamps along the railings. He watched silently from his terrace, hesitant yet drawn. Her movements were graceful, deliberate, almost meditative. Without planning it, he found himself lighting diyas too, each one placed as though aligning with hers. When their lights flickered in unison, he felt a strange stillness, as if the air between them had acknowledged something sacred. At home, things remained unchanged. His wife Priya continued her routines, his children, their studies, his mother, her prayers, but Rajiv's inner world had begun to tilt. He found himself passing during the day, thinking of the face, the soft lamp glow, that is Mira's. Once while driving, he caught himself smiling for no reason, and his mind was wandering to catch her glimpse of sight again and again. It was flashing on his mind. He didn't tell anyone, not even himself, what it meant. It wasn't love, not hate, and it was a kind of awareness. It was like finding a forgotten melody in his own memory. One evening, when the rain returned and thunder rolled across the city, the power went out. The lane lay dark in the darkness, except for a single candle flickering in a balcony, and its light fell slowly across her face, serene, almost divine. He could not look away. Then he raised her head. Then she raised her head slightly, and their eyes met, not through accident this time, but intention. For a heartbeat, everything else disappeared, a storm, the noise, the years behind them, and it felt like standing before a mirror that reflected not body but a soul. He exhaled slowly, a whisper escaping his lips. Mira, he murmured, not knowing it, that was her name. The wind carried the syllable away to her side, perhaps, and somewhere deep within he felt a stirring, the unmistakable pulse of recognition, first vibration of a karmic bond, awakening after a long sleep. That night, Rajiv could not sleep. He sat at his desk, opened a notebook he hadn't used in years, and wrote a single line: some connections don't begin, they continue. And The next chapter, beginning of unspoken words. The silence had many shapes. It can be heavy like a stone or light as breath. It can suffocate or save. But between Meera and Rajiv, silence became a bridge. It began subtly, as all profound things do. When she opened a balcony doors each morning, she felt a stillness waiting across the lane, as if the air itself passed until her first movement. The moment she lifted a coffee mug, she could almost sense another hand doing the same, and though she never spoke, something invisible connected the rhythm of their days. And the morning rituals, like Bangalore's dawn, was soft, a mist that curled around the rooftops, a chorus of sparrows stitching music into the breeze, and somewhere the cuckoo were singing and longing. Skylark and Mira would sit by her railing and noticing all these things connecting to her solitude and longingness. Her notebook open and words half formed. Rajiv on his terrace would sip tea, pretending to read the newspaper while his eyes traced the golden edge of her presence. Sometimes their eyes met just for a second, enough to alter the day's pulse. There was no embarrassment, no explanation, just a quiet acknowledgement that they existed in each other's periphery with unspoken comfort. One morning, when she looked particularly weary, shadows beneath her eyes, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned a page, Rajiv felt a knot in his heart, and he didn't know why, but he could not bear it. He wanted to send her a message somehow, though words were impossible. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and silently said within himself, "You are not alone today." She looked up almost immediately, as if she had heard something. Her gaze lifted, softened, and for the first time she smiled faintly. That smile lingered with him for the rest of the day, like sunlight trapped inside memory. When silence spoke that evening, when the rain returned, Mira sat by the balcony again. She had been struggling to write. Memories of her past had been clawing back: her mother's absence, her broken marriage, the echoes of things that once promised forever. Her pen slipped from her fingers, clattering softly onto the floor across the lane. Rajiv was watering. His small terrace plants froze. A sudden heaviness swept through him, and an unexplainable sadness, raw and deep. He did not know its source, only that it wasn't his own. He looked across and saw her head bowed, and for some time a sudden heaviness swept across and his head. He was just like that, speaking to her telepathic. Without thinking, he placed a watering can down and whispered, "Please don't cry." No one could have heard him. Yet she lifted her head again, her breath hitching, eyes widening as though she had felt the whisper in her bones. The rain grew heavier, hiding their tears, blending sorrow with serenity, and so began their language of silence, a communion that neither dared to break with words. It is quite unexplainable sadness, raw and deep. He did not know its source, only that it wasn't his own. And the whispers in the wind, nights became their quiet sanctuary. When the world slept, they lingered by their own world, thinking about each other and thinking about the moments of shared glance, longing, desires, and waiting for each other every day and night. It started to continue. Their hearts tried to whisper in the wind, in the darkness, in the day, in the sunlight, and became their quiet sanctuary. And their gestures were not planned but instinctive, echoes from an older rhythm. Sometimes she would respond by turning her light off and on, as if saying, "I see you." And sometimes he would tap his cup twice on the railing, his small ritual of presence. Their gestures were unplanned and instinctive. She began to write differently after that, softer, more fluid. Her diary, once filled with pain, now carried reflections of claim. "There is someone across the lane whose silence comforts me more than words ever could. We do not speak, yet I feel understood." Rajiv too found his world shifting. The bitterness that had haunted his marriage began to dissolve, not replaced by infatuation but by peace. He started helping his mother more, listening to her stories again. At work, he was gentler with his staff, patient even in chaos. He didn't realize it yet, but Mira's presence had begun to heal him. And the day of Jasmine and Sunday, when the air smelled of rain and earth, Mira hung a small garland of jasmine on a balcony door. Its fragrance drifted across to Rajiv's terrace, stirring something tender in him, a forgotten memory of his mother braiding his late sister's hair, of home before it fractured. That evening, he placed a small brass bowl with floating jasmine flowers on his parapet wall. She noticed it instantly. Two souls, two gestures mirrored, world less divine, and it is pure. From that day onward, their connection deepened beyond sight. Sometimes she would wake at midnight with an ache she couldn't explain, and across the lane, Rajiv would race too. Restless heart echoes the same rhythm, facing each other on the open terrace. When she found peace through meditation, he would sleep better that night without knowing why. It wasn't love as the world defined it, it was a resonance, a reunion of energies that had waited lifetimes to meet again. The unseen conversation one night when the city slept under a sheet of silver moonlight, she wrote a final line in a journal before closing it. If souls could speak, ours already have. At the same moment, Rajiv, without knowing, whispered to the stars. If silence could write, it would spell your name, Mira. The universe must have smiled, for in that instant, a shooting star traced the sky between their homes, vanishing like a divine signature. And the day they finally spoke, fate never rushes, it waits for the hour when hearts are ready. For 5 long years, Meera and Rajiv had lived in parallel worlds, two lives moving like quiet rivers beside each other, never crossing but always listening to the same current. And then one afternoon, river found its way. Unexpected moment, it was late February kind of day that carried spring's promise and winter's tenderness in the same breath. The air was bright with the smell of rain-soaked earth. The community organized a small Vasant Utsav in the clubhouse lawns, children performing dances and rangolis with a symmetric drawn, elderly couples chattering under canopies, and lights strung like constellations. And Meera rarely attended these gatherings, but that day her daughter insisted, because she's a doctor going to give a kind of no message or awareness program. She invited her mother. Amma, you have been inside for too long. Come just for a while. Everyone is curious about the famous author who hides behind jasmine plants. Mira smiled faintly and agreed. Perhaps she was tired of her own solitude, draped in an ivory sari with the silver threads. She looked ethereal, like a poetry in human form. Her calm presence drew subtle attention. Whispers followed her as she walked through the small crowd. Across the lawn, Rajiv was helping the volunteers arrange chairs. His wife had chosen not to come. They were living like shadows, not connected by habit, not affection. But when he turned, he saw Mira. He was stunned by her beauty, standing under a tree, off lit by strings of golden bulbs. His breath caught. He felt as if all those years of quiet longing had condensed into a single second. He didn't move toward her at once, he simply watched, but destiny doesn't tolerate hesitation too long. A diary that she carried, it fell. A group of children running around past Mira brushed against her gently. Her diary slipped from her hand and fell open on the grass. Pages fluttered, catching the light before she could bend down. Hand picked it up carefully, steady, familiar. When she looked up, he was there, Rajiv. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them thickened with memory, not of moments lived, but of moments felt. He held the diary with reverence as though returning something sacred. You dropped this, he said softly, his voice warm, deep, unexpectedly gentle, was exactly how she had imagined it would sound. And Thank you, she replied. It was like a honey, and he was unable to tolerate that voice, her presence, her beauty, taking it with a trembling hand. Their fingers brushed just for an instant, but that instant expanded into eternity. Her pulse raised, her heart stumbled into rhythm. Conversation between lines. They stood in silence for a moment longer than necessary. It was Mira who finally broke it, her voice quiet, yet steady. I have often seen you tending to your plans, she said. He smiled, surprised by her courage to acknowledge it. And I have often seen you writing, he replied. It's comforting to know someone still believes in his words. They both laughed softly, the kind of laughter that comes when the heart has waited too long to speak. A drizzle began, tiny drops shimmering in the string of lights. People around them hurried under canopies, but neither moved. Rain had always been their silent witness, and now it returned to bless their first words. Rajiv took off his light jacket and held it slightly above her shoulder. You will catch a cold, he murmured, and you, I have been waiting. 5 years, he said, half smiling for this rain. And something in his tone, not flirtation, not mere affection, but recognition, melted the distance between them. She didn't reply, only looked at him, eyes glistening with everything unspoken. When the rain passed, they found themselves sitting together under a small canopy near the jasmine hedge. The same flowers that once carried messages across balconies, the scent lingered between them like destiny signature. You have changed this place, Rajiv said quietly. Since you come, every silence feels alive. Mira looked down. Maybe silence was always alive. We just forgot to listen. He smiled. You have always been listening, haven't you? She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, and I think you have always been speaking, just not with words. It was the truest thing either of them had ever said. For a long time, they sat without talking, watching the rain ease into mist, the lamps reflecting off puddles like scattered stars. And it was the beginning of something new, but the remembering of something ethereal. The departure as the evening thin Mira's daughter came to escort her mother home back. Rajiv stood quietly, his heart heavy yet strangely calm. She turned to him once before leaving, eyes meeting his silent gratitude. No promises, no expectation, just a recognition that time, connection crossed into worlds of words, and it remained sacred. That night, Mira couldn't write. She simply sat by her window, feeling the warmth of his voice lingering in her chest. Across the lane, Rajiv looked at the same moon, whispering to the wind. So, this is how destiny sounds, soft like her name. And the blossoming, the connection deepens. Some love does not need a body. Some love does not wait for words. Some love exists in the silent spaces between heartbeats, unseen threads of longing in the invisible rhythm of two souls moving toward each other without even touching. For Meera and Rajiv, this was that love, a daily pulse, days blurred into nights with quiet unpredictability of the universe. She could wake, make tea, feed her husband, teach online, write and cook. He would rise, tend to his mother, check his business accounts, return late, fall asleep, exhausted, and across the lane their hearts met every morning. It began subtly, a glance out of her balcony window, a feeling in her chest almost magnetic, pulling her gaze in the exact direction of his terrace. And there he would be, already looking not directly at her, but sensing her presence. It was a communion without action, a conversation without language. They didn't speak, they didn't write, they didn't gesture, and yet every pulse, every flicker of emotion traveled through the air like electricity. When she felt lonely, he felt the ache. When he felt tired, she felt the weight. When she smiled, he experienced a sudden warmth, and when he exhaled relief, her chest softened. It was intimacy beyond form, beyond society's definition, a private universe shared by two souls who had recognized each other across lifetimes. Dreams that whispered at night, the connection deepens in dream. Meera dreamt of rain-soaked gardens where Rajiv waited, silent but present, offering no words, only an unshakable feeling of home. They walked through endless corridors of light, sat beneath golden trees, sometimes holding the hand, sometimes merely breathing the same air. In those dreams, she tasted the life she never had, laughter spilling from unguarded lips, touch that was gentle but not carnal, long conversation that needed no words, and the warmth of being utterly seen. Rajing in his dreams found her in the same way, quiet presence that made all his burdens lighter. They shared meals in the moonlight, walked on invisible beaches, watched storms together, sometimes simply sat heart to heart in silence that spoke louder than any language. And yet, morning always returned. The terrace and the balcony replaced the gardens. A real world intruded. No hand was held, no word was exchanged. A sacred yearning, this unbroken rhythm lasted for months, then years. They became attuned to each other's moods with a precision that defined explanation. When Meera laughed with her daughter, Rajiv felt it in the middle of his busiest boardroom meeting. When Rajiv tended his mother with quiet patience, Meera felt the serenity in her own chest as if she had performed the act herself. Their connection grew more intense than any shared moment could have been. And every night they returned to their dreamscape, more vivid, more real, more intimate than the day had allowed. Their souls whispered confession bodies never could. Hearts wrote poetry only the other could read. It was erotic and spiritual, tender and eternal. Love that existed entirely in the realm of consciousness. The paradox that and yet in the world nothing changed. Mira walked her balcony alone. Rajiv returned home late. The street remained silent. No one suspected the universe had shifted between two willows. No one knew that the human heart could be so utterly alive without touching another. It was a paradox, a love more intimate than any physical embrace, more real than any conversation, yet completely invisible, and they didn't want it any other way. For in the silence, in the dreams, in the heartbeats that traveled across the lane, they were free, freer than they had ever been in 35 years of ordinary life. Sometimes Mira would close her eyes and whisper, "We are here, even if the world cannot see us." And somewhere across the lane, Rajiv's lips would move as if repeating the same vow, always, even beyond sight. And this is how their life continued. The trials of reality, next chapter. Life has always a testing, a way to heart has quietly built. And life has a way of testing what the heart has quietly built. For Meera and Rajiv, those tests came not in words, not in confrontation, but in walls of dust, concrete, and circumstance. Arrival of the wall, it began subtly, a small construction project, a new building in the lane, seemingly harmless. The workers arrived early, their voices loud against the soft morning rhythmic hum of machinery, replaced the gentle murmur of birds. At first, Meera shrugged it off. The city changes, life moves forward, she thought. But as weeks turned into months, plot between their willows began to rise, scaffolding climbed higher, walls solidified, and familiar gaze across the lane became abstracter. Rajiv's terrace, once visible from a balcony, disappeared behind a curtain of bricks. Her heart tightened each morning as she walked to a railing, realized he was gone, or at least unreachable, and yet she could feel him heart to heart in absence. The days grew heavier. She missed the subtle synchronity of their mornings. She missed the shared awareness of moods and silent laughter. But every evening when she closed her eyes, their connection deepened as if the wall had only made their hearts lean closer together. She dreamt of him more vividly now in gardens of golden light, walking hand in hand without barriers. Their laughter ringing clear, their hearts aligned. He appeared in her thoughts during mundane chores, during quiet meals, in the aroma of jasmine or the smell of the wet earth. Rajiv too felt her presence constantly during shower and during his daydreaming, even when he was late at work, even when the terrace lay hidden behind concrete. He would pass mid task, sensing her mood, sending unspoken warmth across across the invisible bond. The universe had given them a paradox. Reality refused them, yet the soul demanded recognition. The unseen conversations began communicating in subtler ways than ever before. If she felt tired, he would feel exhaustion in his chest. If he smiled in a rare private moment, she would feel warmth spreading through her hands. She remembered an old memory of loss. He would instinctively reach for her in his mind. It was a language only they could speak, a melody written in heartbeats, a synchronous breaths, and in quiet vibration of presence. It was intimate, more intimate than physical touch could ever be. Their desires, their dreams, their love all existed in the sacred realm of imagination and the spirit. Dreams of love, the dreams became richer, almost tangible. They shared long walks beneath rain swept trees, conversation that needed no words, laughter that lifted the soul. Sometimes they dreamed of quiet nights by a fireplace, of cooking together, of sitting in silence, reading books aloud, of making love, of life without judgments, without expectation. In dreams, they tasted the intimacy of shared existence, the closeness of love, untainted by circumstances, fear, or duty. Every sensation felt real, yet morning returned with its own obligations. Husband, wife, mother, daughter, a city too alive to pass, and they accepted it because their hearts had learned a truth that reality could not offer. Love can exist fully without possession, without intrusion, without limitation. The pain of visibility, next chapter, construction slowly grew to block even glimpses, a physical world shrinking to a few stolen moments of perception. Meera sometimes stood on the community path, hoping to catch a stray glance, and Rajiv sometimes lingered on the edge of the terrace, waiting for a shadow to appear. At these moments where fleeting privacy was scarce, and curiosity of neighbors, social obligations, family responsibilities constantly intruded, and still in their minds they wandered freely through gardens, beaches, rain-drenched streets, and rooms filled with music and laughter. The more reality sought to separate them, the more vividly they imagined their connection. A sacred paradox. 5 years into silent devotion, they have never touched, never spoken, never met in the open. And their souls were in conversation, hearts beat in unison, their dreams intertwined as if rehearsing a life that might never manifest. It was insane, it was sacred, it was real. Meera whispered once, closing her eyes. After a long day, perhaps this is the truest form of love, never needing the world to witness it. And somewhere behind bricks and scaffolding, Rajiv thought the same. Perhaps the world will never know, but we already do. The rain fell lightly that night, washing away the dust, carrying the echoes of their shared silence, which no longer need word or touch or any kind of physical presence. They started to get connected eternally, heart to heart, soul to soul. Heart to heart, though it is quite near, feels like miles apart, but they are getting connected. And their souls, a kind of conversation, and somewhere, they get really connected. Perhaps the world will never know, but we already do that. And this is how their life continued for a longer period of time. And the next Diwali of Hearts, the Diwali in Bangalore had a different rhythm that year. The city's hum was punctuated by the crackle of fireworks, laughter spilling from homes, and the fragrance of incense and sweets drifting across lanes. For Meera, it had always been a quiet festival, warmth of lights, promise of renewal, yet experienced alone. Her husband, unwell, slept early. Her daughter, immersed in hospital duties, promised to join the celebration later. Across the lane, Rajiv faced a Diwali that mirrored his life, divided, busy, duty bound, and yet somehow hollow. Lighting the first flame that evening, Mira arranged her lamps along the balcony railing, small clay diyas flickering in soft golden rhythm. Each flame was deliberate, a heartbeat, a pulse of presence. Somewhere across the lane, Rajiv had done the same. A terrace transformed into a constellation of light, carefully aligned, each diya placed as if to mirror hers. He did not announce, and it didn't invite attention. This was for her, not for anyone else, a silent ritual of devotion. She lit her lamp and felt the familiar tug in her chest, the energy that had been connecting them for years. Somewhere in her mind, she felt him lights his first diya in response. No words were spoken, no gestures made, yet the universe seemed to fold, bringing their hearts closer than ever. A telepathic dance. That night, their connection deepened in ways neither had anticipated. Mira closed her eyes and envisioned him walking slowly among the lights, adjusting a diya, smiling softly at the gentle glow. She felt the warmth radiate across the lane, as though lamps themselves carried his presence. Rajiv in turn imagined her standing quietly arranging the tiny flames with the same care, and the hair plastered on her face. And in the wind, it is moving and glittering. The silhouette of her beauty, her eyes reflecting the light. He felt the rhythm of her breathing, her unspoken thoughts, her heartbeat touching her, and the intense, intimate they were. It was sacred. It was a conversation beyond words. They shared the night in a dance of consciousness telepathically, and they were intimate, close, and started to live in all kind of passion, fascination that no one knows. It is heart to heart, soul to soul, mind to mind, a kind of telepathic love they started to live. A flicker of lamp became a message, alignment of diyas mirrored a thought, a soft inhalation of one carried to the other as understanding, longing, and tenderness. No one around them noticed it. The air between their terrace vibrated with connection, visible chords of soul to soul love, more intense than any physical touch could be. The dreams of festival, when they finally slept, their dreams were intertwined. They walked together through an endless Diwali landscape, streets lined with lights that never faded, skies filled with fireworks frozen mid-burst, the scent of jasmine, marigold she wore on her hair, which was let loose, and a white pastel shade silk sari she was wearing. Everything mesmerized him. He is magnetically attracted towards her. It's all happening only in their dreams. In these dreams, shared laughter as they lit endless rows of diyas, walked side by side along rain-slick streets, barefoot and unafraid, and feeding each other, spending moments together, cooking, enjoying each and every moment, spoke in silent thoughts, revealing fears, joys, and dreams never shared with anyone, felt the warmth of embrace without ever touching. Every detail was amplified by their longing, every sigh, every glance, every heartbeat existed only in their private universe. Yet it was real as life itself. The paradox of intimacy, morning returned lamps of their terrace had burned low, streets filled with neighbors leaving sweets and firework remnants behind. Life resumed its ordinary rhythm, yet nothing has been lost. The intensity of the previous night lingered, a warmth, a resonance, a promise not yet spoken but deeply felt. Mira whispered silently, "No one will see this, and yet it exists forever." And Rajivan is closed his eyes in exact synchrony, forever, ever in silence. The heartbeat of destiny, Diwali became a landmark in their invisible history. Festival of lights mirrored the fire in their hearts, brilliant, uncontainable, and sacred. Neighbors commented on the beauty of decorations, the meticulous placement of diyas, unusual symmetry between terraces. Yet none guessed that the real celebration existed in the space between the lamps. In telepathic glances, dreams, and shared energy, no hands were held, no words exchanged, and somehow that made it infinitely more intimate. It was love beyond the ordinary, passion contained in thought, devotion, ethereal, unspoken, untouchable. A long years of waiting though the construction began subtly, and it was once a kind of abstraction, a concrete and steel and brick. Neighbors commented on the noise, the inconvenience, growing shadow between the villas, yet none suspected the real tragedy, that a subtle, sacred connection was being physically concealed from the world. Mira sometimes stood at the balcony, peering over the dust and brick walk, feeling the invisible line of his presence, and a wave of longing swept her entire body. She knew he was aware. She could feel him there, somewhere always waiting. Rajiv, meanwhile, spent nights pacing the terrace, imagining the gentle tilt of her head, the curl of her hair in the soft light, the tilt of her shoulders as she wrote. Every detail of her existence was vivid in his mind, sharper than reality itself. The unseen conversation with each passing days, their telepathic connection intensified. When she was tired, he instinctively sent calm, warmth, reassurance. When he felt frustration, she shared serenity, letting him carry his burdens with gentleness. When she laughed quietly while writing or cooking, he felt it as if a breeze had touched his chest. When he stared at the night sky thinking of her, she felt the exact pull in her heart. No words were spoken, no gestures made, and yet the intimacy between them grew sharper, deeper, and undeniable. Dreamscapes and desire, nights after nights, their dreams intertwined with growing complexity, and they walked through endless rain-slick streets, sharing laughter that never needed explanation. They sat by unseen rivers, speaking only in thought, feeling every nuance of others' emotions, shared quiet domesticities, cooking, reading, arranging flowers, and decorating the house, cleaning, even laughing at imagined mishaps. In dreams, they kissed, their hands held, breathed together. Acts of intimacy existed only in the sacred space between consciousness and imagination. Each morning they woke alone, hearts heavy with longing, yet full with the knowledge that the other existed somewhere in perfect resonance. A paradox of existence. Life continued to intrude relentlessly. Meera cared for her husband and daughter, keeping her duties as anchor. Raju balanced his work, his mother, his fractured home life. The city moved on unmindful, indifferent. Yet the more the world tried to separate them, the stronger their inner bond became. It was a kind of paradox, a love forbidden by circumstances, invisible to others, impossibly in reality. Vivid, real, and intense, alive in thought, in dreams, in the pulse of heartbeat shared across distances. Telepathic intimacy intensifies the evenings, the shadows lengthened, invisible thread connecting them became almost tangible. Mira closed her eyes, leaning against the railings, felt him there, weight of his presence, softness in his gaze, warmth that always traveled through the distance between their souls. Rajiv across the lane did the same, sensed her joy, her quiet contentment, gentle tremor in her heart. For hours they existed in the same space without moving. City's noise became background music, colors of holy blurred around them. Their connection, their Diwali celebrations together telepathically, though invisible, was sharper, intimate than ever. They shared dreams, smiles that reached eyes and art, breaths that synchronized without effort, thoughts that intertwined like threads of gold. Every unspoken feeling became a language, every glance a sentence, every heartbeat a vow. She could not cross a lane, he could not move closer. No one could know of the depth that existed in that quiet, color filled afternoons and days and nights, and yet the connection reached a peak. Longing, desire, intimacy, all were amplified by the impossibility of touch. It was erotic, yes, it was more ethereal. A sense, it was tender, yes, in ways the body could not measure. It was love, pure, ethereal, and unconsummated. This is how their telepathic communion during day two, the connection never faltered. And Mira felt fatigue after teaching her online classes. He felt the strain across the city, sending warmth and quiet strength through the invisible thread and tied them. When Rajiv had some kind of work stress, she immediately shared calm, letting him carry his burden more lightly. The divine intimacy, their bond transcended desire the world understand. It is quite pure and continued. The cosmic connection, the karmic fulfillment. This is a kind of karmic fulfillment. Some love is not meant for eyes, some love is not meant for hands, some love is written in heart, sung by the soul, recognized only by the universe. For Meera and Rajiv, it was that love.